Why'd you get in trouble?
Why are you laughing? What'd you do? Oh. What'd you say? Say it. That's a big move.
I know, right?
I have very colorful language. My mom would say. Okay, we're gonna tackle Lizzie and I'm gonna get her another butter.
I don't want another butter.
Yeah, that's the whole point. We talked to her.
Oh, there's a video game.
I know.
It's not even started.
That is.
Yes, it
Way
is.
back in my head.
Oh, it's recording.
An hour.
You sound good today. It smells so bad.
Hey, what's
Why is it? Why can't I be over there?
workout. Did
Right
you do
on.
the pickleball thing? I'm gonna do the pickleball thing. Played pickleball, the rally pickleball. How many pickleball did you hit? Okay, if you have the highest, then you don't have to do the fourth round.
How would I know? Yeah.
Okay, guys, so here is the plan for today. We are going to, you're talking about section 3, like we did yesterday. And then for your Explore page today, we're going to be doing a Frederick Douglass reading. And after you're done reading, I want you to be answering what were living conditions like for most slaves. And so in the reading, Frederick Douglass, he was a slave who escaped to freedom and then became an abolitionist, someone who fought against slavery. You got an excerpt. You're not reading this entire book. There you go. So, but we are going to, like I said, being a historical book, there are terms in here. It says but they are historical terms, and where it is, it says they're given one pair of trousers for winter, made of coarse Negro cloth. If that makes any of you guys uncomfortable to say that, one, I can't make you say anything in the first place, and two, like I said, if it makes you uncomfortable to say that, just say coarse cloth. Like I said, it is a historical thing. That's what it says in the book, and it's not going to be racist or anything to say it, as long as you're keeping it in the context of this book, of your reading. Because like I said, the reading, I literally copied 2 pages out of this book and use that as your Explore page today. So,
What do you mean by inappropriate?
okay, that's inappropriate. We're going to continue on. So, we are going to continue on with our reading. Eli, your group has good things today. So, we'll get that going here in a moment. And then we're going to go ahead and get into section 3, or continue talking about section 3. So, I'll give you guys about 7 minutes to work on your Explore page. I'm going to pass the stapler around. Let's go ahead and get started. good to go.
Master Seven was the captain was master of the presidency, otherwise named the colonel slave. Their first paragraph. Wait, you said their names were Peter, Isaac, Rich, and Jake. These were fairly highly understood.
We didn't start at Baltimore.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on now.
Curly?
No, I got it. Stop. Shush. On this home plantation, and I get it for more than neighboring farms along the way. Name of the farm is plantation, wine, common, new design was under the overseer of the man of Mr. Townsend. Overseers of these and all the rest of the farms, which money received advice from the managers of the plantation. This was the great business place. It was the seat of government for the whole 25. All the fields and overseers settled here. It was distinguished work convicted of any high misdemeanor, rebuke, unmanageable, or evidence of the determination of the way. He was brought immediately here. Put on board the ship, gave the board and water, sold the oxen, on horse, and water, slave digger, and the ones who slaved there. Go. What is the difference between either, neither, neither, neither? Yeah.
Like, is it just the pronunciation, or
His name is Hollis, which I'm a social studies teacher.
I was just
I mean, I really don't know about
Neither, neither.
wait, are they do they mean
Same word.
same word?
Yeah, they mean the same thing, it's just probably the pronunciation, it mean the same thing.
The app was all
But yeah,
Well, why try?
You can read.
Sing it. Okay. No, let her sing it.
We're on the 3-1, let's get up to
I'm listening. Yeah, I know.
like duck down or something.
I'm short enough. Oh.
answer the question.
Well, you read that.
Wait, kid.
Yeah, did you not listen? Because I read it.
You did it.
What are the things that she like? I want to stay with
Sorry, I'm not your slave.
Thank you. Well, she did it, and so I was like, I remember when I was like, okay, I don't know how to pick them, so I'm gonna have to
No, even fried stuff tastes pretty good.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Should
They're like,
just
you
warm it up
can
in the microwave. And then, no, she was like, you have to do this, but you have to do it this way. And then they're like, it wasn't like you could.
Not gonna lie, we were both in the same class.
Whenever you were in class, I don't think you'll ever pay attention.
No, it really wasn't. She yelled at me so much. Yeah. I forgot you were there.
Okay, what are the living conditions for
No, she literally yelled at me so much.
I never got.
I'm surprised.
Except for that one time you're on your phone, I'm like, Aiden, she's gonna show you. Dude, you didn't even, you should have tapped me or something.
I shouldn't have.
You should have been like, Aiden, pay attention.
Yeah.
Well, you're over here doing this. That's why I'm like, Aiden, she's going. She came over like, give me your phone. He's like, dude, I told her it was like my second time that it got taken away. Yeah, I know.
Alright guys, so, I had you guys read an excerpt from Frederick Douglass's biography. I mean, this was written by Frederick Douglass. Like we said earlier, he was a former slave who escaped to freedom in the North and then became an abolitionist, someone who fought against slavery because he was like, this is a bad thing, we need to end it. So, question I had you guys answer was, what were living conditions like for most slaves? You guys, Damon?
Bad.
Okay, yes, they were bad. Anyone can tell you they were. Okay, harsh just is another synonym for bad.
Unhealthy.
Unhealthy? Okay, that's something we can get to.
Unfair.
Unfair? Okay, let's go back to unhealthy. So, health-wise, are they getting a lot of good food? No? What's their food like? Right, so they get a month allowance at a time, and then they got either a pound of pork or a pound of fish, or, sorry, 8 pounds of pork, 8 pounds of fish. It just depended on where you were. And then Frederick Douglass, he said that you get a bushel of, what did it say? Sorry. Bushel of cornmeal, which is very similar to wheat. You're able to make cornbread and kind of different stuff like that. So you're able to just make what you need to with that. Absolutely. What were their clothes? Did they have good clothing?
No.
No? Right, because they given that the kids, they were actually, and some of the adults, if your clothing ran out, you're not gonna be able to go to like to Walmart or Dillard's or something and get new clothes. You have, I mean, if it wears out, it wears out. It's not like you can go to Famous Footwear or something. If my shoe wears out and absolutely can't wear it, I'm not wearing my shoes. I'm going barefoot. Things like that. And like I said, with the kids, it was one of those things that they got two coarse linen shirts per year, and when that failed them, when that wore through, they went naked for the rest of the year. So, and which, I mean, that wouldn't be very, it gets cold. I mean, the south, it gets cold sometimes. It snows down there, very, very rare occasions. So those are it's very cold. So not like you can put on a jacket or something. So your parents probably know, you guys grow very quickly. And so you're, like, my cousin, he's got like size 11 feet. I think when he was in middle school, he went through three or four different sizes of feet of shoes. So, yeah, in just 2 years. So in those 2 years, he grew like 2 sizes per year. So it was one of those things that went really quickly. So they would sometimes they would grow out of their shoes or out of their other clothes. Absolutely. What were they treated well?
No.
No. How were they treated? Animals? Were they kind of like your household dog, treated well, given good food, that kind of thing, or were they beaten? Beaten? Yep, they were beaten. They were. Do what, David?
What?
What'd you say?
My uncle beats his dog.
Oh, okay. Let's continue on let's go on to here. So, you've got, hey guys, let's focus back in. So, you're like, they're being whipped, beaten with a cow skin, which is, what it describes it as, was a large hickory stick, heavy cow skin, so a club with leather kind of wrapped around it, that sort of thing. Absolutely. But okay, if you think of it, ask me later, okay? So, let's go ahead and continue on. So I'm going to put your explore page away, and we are going to go ahead and get back into our notes. Did we cover living conditions yesterday? Yeah. We did? Excellent. So we are going to go ahead and, actually, there was a picture I wanted to discuss yesterday. So remember how we said that they're housed in dirt floor cabins with very few furnishings, often leaky roofs? This is what they kind of look like. Granted, I mean, this picture is later, probably late 1800s, early 1900s. Just you can tell by the kind of way they're dressed. But that's not what we're focusing. We're focusing on the cabin. So here on the chimney, you can see there's a large hole around the chimney, so the chimney would sway in the wind. When it rains, it gets rain would get in. Sometimes when it would snow, your snow would come in. Yeah, what? So cameras kind of came into existence the 1840s. So because the Civil War is actually one of the first really photographed things in the world. That's what we have. Photography was really in its infancy at that point. So they did not like we have today. It's on your phone or something. You can take a quick picture. It's very, very different. But they did have cameras. So here it's a little different than what you read about with Frederick Douglass, because the house is actually up off the ground, elevated about 2 feet, and so you're not really sleeping on wood floor or on the ground. You're sleeping more than likely in a bed, which, like Fred saw in the reading, that wasn't all that common. So, anybody have any questions about that? No? Okay. So we're going to continue on and talk about punishments and slave codes. So, I want for you guys to please read on page 426, section that says punishment and slave codes. It's like 3 paragraphs. So I'll have you guys read that. And I want you to be able to tell me, how did slave owners control their slaves? What were some of the things they did? Let's go and get started. Caleb, I'm going to slide behind you.
Or some
So, what were some of the ways that slave owners controlled their slaves? What was some- David?
Whipping them.
They whipped them? Mason?
They pass laws.
Yep, the slave codes, passing laws saying where they, a little more restriction, absolutely. Really?
Sometimes they offer more food or better living conditions.
Right, so, while whippings and beatings are the main ways we think of, where they were kept in line, they were also given more food and better living conditions, absolutely. Take,
Was it like a cow whip or was it a whip with like stones and like
both, actually. So, sometimes they did have the leather whip, kinda like, when you think Indiana Jones, something like that, you had that kind of whip, or, something that, I believe it's called like the cat of nine tails, is the type of whip, had different strings on the end of it with glass and, nails and things in there. That one was probably less common, just due to the fact that, you catch them wrong and that it could kill them. And so you didn't wanna, they were of value to you, so you didn't wanna kill your slaves. But that was one they would've used. Damon?
They locked them in the dungeon.
Right, they took them into solitary confinement type thing. They locked them in the dungeon because in working with families, I mean, families were a very important aspect of slave life. I mean, if you're not with your family, you're going to be utterly, I mean, slavery is miserable, but with your family, it made it a little more tolerable. Without the family, you're going to be utterly miserable. It was another way of punishment, absolutely. Rosie? They would. It was probably less than what you had at like your own rations, but they wanted to keep you alive. So they wouldn't 100% starve them, but it was they did kind of pull back on their food. David?
They did the iron chains and then the collar with the horns.
Right. So they wrapped them, they chained them down so they couldn't run away, that sort of thing, and also in the collar with the spikes on with the horns on it, you're not gonna be able to sleep well at night. So it kind of kept you up, so you weren't able to do that. Excellent. Glad liking the input. So we're gonna get started with notes today. So punishment and slave codes. Some planters, like Lily said, they offered more food or better living conditions to encourage slave obedience. Other plantation owners used punishment and fear instead. Because the way they would kind of do that is, actually right there, punishment was done in front of the rest of the group, in front of the rest of the slaves to kind of keep them in line. Because if you see one slave being whipped or beaten, you are less likely to do that same thing. It was a way of keeping them all in line by only really punishing one person. So another way that planters used to keep their slaves in line was by making them promises. So, do you have a question, David?
Yeah.
What you got?
Did the other slaves ever get into arguments and start fights?
I would imagine so. I mean, they're people. They're going to have disagreements. So you probably might have had a few scuffles. The slaves might have had a few scuffles. And I haven't read anything about that, but I mean, I would imagine so. So, one other way, like I said, was they made their slaves promises. So this guy here, he is from the TV show Roots. We talked about Fiddler yesterday, talked about him a little bit. So this guy here, he was Fiddler's master, and one of the ways he kind of kept slaves in line is he told them that so long as they did their jobs, they obeyed his rules, he would never sell them. They could live out their life on his plantation, which meant that they could live with their families. They didn't have to worry about being separated from their families. They could live with them for the rest of their lives. I mean, and this is historically accurate because, I mean, Roots, it's an actual story. Like, the main guy who kind of went back and traced his history, this was, I mean, like his, I don't know how many greats, grandfather's master. So, I mean, this guy, he actually existed, and it was his, like I said, it was his policy that said, if you guys do what I tell you to do, what I ask of you, you don't have to worry about being sold. You can live your life out here forever. So, let's get into slave codes. So, slave codes were laws that restricted slaves' actions, what they were able to do. Some of these laws prohibited slaves from traveling far from home, and actually prohibited slaves from getting an education. So, this was like a statewide thing. So, I can't remember his name for the life of me, but planters like him, they had different rules on their plantation. Things that they said, okay, this is what you have to do, and this is what I want you to do. The slave codes were passed by governments. So like the government of Alabama, Alabama just one that I pulled out of thin air. They passed laws that would restrict slaves from traveling far from home or receiving an education. So that's what we got for punishment and slave codes. Does anybody have any questions at all about punishment or kind of laws about that? Okay. So, Anna, you have a question? Or you just kind of in there.
Oh, I don't.
You don't? Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and continue on. So I want for you guys on page 426 to read the slave culture section, that small paragraph, and then read the family and community portion. It continues on to page 427. So let's get started.
We all know.
All right, guys. So we're gonna go ahead and continue on we're gonna talk about family and slave culture. So many enslaved African Americans, they found comfort in their community and culture. This was due to the fact that being in a terrible situation that they were with slavery, their families and their communities gave them someone to connect to, gave them friends, gave them someone they could talk to if need be. So, it said family was the most important aspect of slave communities, and many slaves actually feared separation from each other more than they did for other punishments, like beatings or whippings. That's what they were afraid of. So, they would have rather been beaten or whipped than be separated. And to really kind of help you understand this, the pictures up here I've got, they're also from the show Roots. The girl down there in the bottom corner, in the left corner, that is Kizzy. She was, she's one of the, I mean, she existed. She was one of the characters. What happened with her is the guy that was up here, that was her master. So her master's niece actually taught her how to read and write. And so what had happened was, she had a boyfriend and she forged a travel pass for him because they were going to escape together. They were going to go have a better life. So she forged a pass for him and he ran away and then he got caught. And ultimately, while they were interrogating him, said that Kizzy was the one that, that forged the pass for him, that got the pass. And so, and these are her parents over here. And what had happened was her mom actually went to their master and was on her hands and knees begging that he whip Kizzy. That he were to beat Kizzy. And because they wanted to stay together. That was, she would have rather, they all would have rather her been beaten and whipped rather than have her go away. Because beatings and whippings, those pains, like they were like, they will go away with time. But the fact that they will never see each other again. Her parents will never see their daughter. Kizzy will never see her parents ever again. That was a much bigger problem. They didn't like that idea more than beatings and whippings. So that makes sense to you guys.
Well, why would her mother go and leave? Wouldn't that make them, wouldn't the slave owner want to make them suffer more?
So her Mammy Bell, that's her name. Mammy Bell, she took care of the niece. She was a very her master absolutely adored her. He liked her a lot. And so she thought that she could use that, what she had built up with her master, kind of to say, hey, you know me, I'm Mammy Bell. I've taken care of your niece when she's come to visit. I've been a loyal slave. Please keep my daughter here. So that she tried to use what she had, what she had built up, the reputation that she built up with her master to try and keep Kizzy there. Does that make sense? No. Kind of hard to see, but in the picture here, Kizzy's actually in the back of the cart being taken away to the next plantation where she is going to live out the rest of her life. So, yeah, she never saw her parents again. Very unfortunate.
Was Kizzy like cut out of the show, or did they still visit her?
They followed her. They kind of, because the guy who actually the show is about, that she is one of his great grandparents, or she is one of his great grandmothers. So I kind of after she went away, it followed her. Kind of told her story, kind of to keep that lineage, kind of see where he had come from. That makes sense? Awesome. So, enslaved parents, they kept their heritage alive by by passing down family histories. So, kind of go back to the picture to really kind of show you guys. The dad here, he was captured from Africa. He was brought over on during the slave trade. And in Africa, his name is Kunta Kinte. He was a Mandinka warrior who actually, Mandinka, they were a tribe in Africa. And he was a very proud man. He got brought over and he passed down the Mandinka history to Kizzy. It helped give, histories like that, they helped give slaves kind of a sense of identity. Kind of said, I'm not just a slave, I am the daughter of a Mandinka warrior. My dad is from Africa. Africa runs through my veins type thing. Gave them a sense of belonging. So that's why they pass down the histories and also keep their heritage alive. So folk tales, these were used to teach lessons about how to survive under slavery. Often it involved a trickster who was that represented the slave, and they defeated a stronger animal by outwitting it, and this represented their master. So they really showed that they wanted to try and be free, that they wanted to